It may seem quiet right now. The world moves as usual. No loud signs in the sky, no dramatic shifts in the wind. But if you've been sensing something in the atmosphere, something you can't quite name, you're not imagining it. The spirit realm is already stirring. The silence you're feeling, it isn't absence. It's announcement. Because April 12, 2025, marks a turning point, subtle in the eyes of many, but profound to those who are tuned in. Today, Venus stations direct, and something sacred begins to return. For weeks now, you may have felt like something was missing. The light in your relationships dimmed. Your confidence flickered. Your ability to feel beauty, intimacy, or even clarity in what you truly value, it all seemed distant, distorted, or simply paused. That wasn't failure. That was refinement. Venus retrograde pulled you inward, stripped away the illusions, and revealed the gaps in your foundation, not to shame you, but to prepare you. To reset your heart to a higher frequency. And now, something ancient begins to rise again. Just as Esther stood before the king after a season of hidden preparation, washed, anointed, and clothed in purpose, Esther 5 verses 1-2, you too are being called to step into the light of your own truth. To reclaim the power that you may have once handed away for love, for approval, for survival. This isn't about a planet. This is about your soul realigning with the original design heaven spoke over you. This is the day your heart begins to remember who it truly is. And nothing in your life will stay the same after that. You may not have realized what was happening at first. The change was subtle, quiet, creeping, unannounced. You simply began to feel off. The things that once stirred your passion started to lose their flavor. The faces that once felt familiar became emotionally distant. Joy came in flickers, if at all. A kind of sacred numbness settled over your spirit. You weren't falling apart, but it felt like the colors of life were draining. And underneath it all, an invisible pressure built, as if something in you was waiting for a permission that never came. That wasn't stagnation. That was the fire. Because what Venus began in retrograde was not a pause. It was a purification. Venus didn't just slow down, she refined you in the fire. The ruler of beauty, connection, love, and value turned inward, and took everything you projected outward, your desirability, your confidence, your clarity in love, and placed it under divine review. No longer were you allowed to find worth in the gaze of others. No longer could you pretend that being chosen meant you were whole. Venus pulled you away from the mirrors you used to measure your reflection by, and left you staring at your own raw, unfiltered self. It was not comfortable. Refinement never is. Scripture speaks of this process in Zechariah 13 verse 9, I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. It's not a metaphor. It's a spiritual mechanism. To refine silver, it must be placed in fire hot enough to burn away every impurity, but not so hot as to destroy its core. The silversmith knows the process is complete when he can see his own reflection in the metal. And so too with you. You were placed in divine fire, not to be consumed, but to be made radiant. Every doubt that surfaced, every emotion that went quiet, every memory that re-emerged from places you thought were healed, those weren't regressions. They were the dross, the false layers, the beliefs that once made you shrink, that had to be pulled up and burned away. You were not being punished. You were being reset. Every wound Venus touched during this retrograde, she touched with the intent to close it properly, so it would no longer reopen at the first sign of love. And yes, there were losses. Friendships that faded. Desires that crumbled. Patterns that collapsed. But what was removed during this time wasn't a loss, it was sacred subtraction. It was the divine hand extracting what could not survive in the frequency you're stepping into now. What couldn't meet you in your truth. What only knew how to love you halfway. You may not have seen it then. But looking back now, you'll notice, everything that left did so to make space for what was always meant to arrive. Because the fire has now passed. The heat is lifting. The silence is softening. And what remains is you, unarmored, clear-eyed, and truer than you've ever been. What remains is the core of your worth, no longer dependent on approval, no longer deluded by performing for connection. What remains is truth, and truth doesn't compete. Truth doesn't chase. Truth simply stands, radiant and immovable, waiting for what recognizes it. And here you are. You've walked through the fire of Venus. You've felt what it's like to go without love, only to remember you are the source of it. You've seen what happens when the beauty is stripped away, and discovered that the sacredness was never in how others saw you, it was always in how you learned to see yourself. This is not about becoming something new. It's about returning to what the fire couldn't touch. And now that the purification is complete, the air begins to shift. The weight lifts. The sky speaks again. And you, refined, reset, realigned, are ready to step into everything that Venus had to take away in order to restore it. There are sacred windows in time, quiet thresholds where heaven leans a little closer to earth, where energy becomes more fluid, more precise, more responsive to the hidden movements of the soul. Today is one of those windows. You might not see it written in the stars or spelled out in signs, but if you're still enough, if your heart is even slightly awake, you will feel it. A door has opened. A soft but powerful invitation is echoing in the invisible. And it is not asking you to wait. It is asking you to respond. This 24-hour window is spiritually weighted. Not just astrologically significant, but cosmically calibrated. The moment Venus stations direct, something in the spirit realm aligns, a divine hinge swings open, and what was once obscured becomes accessible again. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. But it is real. You may feel it as a whisper in the chest, a sudden moment of knowing, a return of clarity that makes you sit up straighter and breathe a little deeper. You may feel as if the fog you've been walking through quietly dissolves, and for the first time in weeks, you can see, not just with your eyes, but with your spirit. This is what Revelation 3 verse 8 speaks of. Behold, I have set before you an open door that no one can shut. That door is not just somewhere out there. It is inside you. It is the energetic gateway into a new cycle of self-worth, alignment, and authentic expression. And you don't walk through it with grand gestures. You walk through it with your yes, the kind that starts deep within and reverberates through every choice you make from this point forward. The significance of what happens during this brief window cannot be overstated. Because in this moment, the universe is listening closely, not to your words, but to your alignment. The first conversation you allow to be honest. The first thought you dare to believe. The first action you take without permission or apology. These small, sacred decisions send ripples into the next 2 months of your life. This isn't about control. It's about congruence. About allowing your inner reality to match your outer movement. About saying yes to what your soul already knows, even if your mind still hesitates. You're not waiting for clarity anymore. You are becoming the clarity. You are the answer to your own question. You are the direction you've been asking for. What Venus returns to you in this moment is not just the ability to love, create, and connect, it is the ability to do so without betraying yourself in the process. You are being trusted with a new level of inner authority. And what you choose now is not just for now, it will reverberate. And here's what's most important, this window will not stay open forever. Like the breath before a song, like the silence before the tide turns, it is precious precisely because it is brief. The energy is clean. Uncomplicated. Untouched by noise or chaos. It is here for you to step through, freely, fully, and with trust. This is the moment you get to realign with what matters. To whisper yes to your calling before the world tries to talk you out of it. To plant the seed of a new reality that doesn't require explanation, only presence. So listen carefully today. To the urge to write something down. To the sentence that lands too perfectly. To the emotion that rises when you thought you were done feeling. These are not distractions. These are directions. This is your turning point. And the most powerful thing you can do is honor it by stepping through with no need to prove, no desire to force, just the quiet, steady knowing that you are ready. Because when the universe opens a door this wide, all it asks is that you walk through it as who you truly are. You may begin to feel it in the smallest of ways, a sudden heaviness when thinking of someone, a subtle ache behind words you used to say without hesitation, or a moment of silence between you and another that feels louder than any conversation you've ever had. Something is shifting. Not just in you, but between you and them. Because the moment Venus moves forward, relationships come into the light. And what was blurry, hidden, romanticized, or distorted, becomes unmistakably clear. This is a revelation. And the veil is lifting. During Venus retrograde, much was buried. The heart turned inward, reviewing every exchange, every unspoken longing, every compromise made in the name of love, connection, acceptance. You may not have known it, but the soul was editing. Sorting. Whispering truth beneath the surface of your interactions. And now that Venus has turned direct, that truth no longer hides. It rises. You may suddenly look at someone and realize, I don't feel safe here. Or this is not where I thrive. Or even more confusing, I loved them more when I didn't fully see them. That's the moment the veil falls. That's the unraveling of illusion. The kind you didn't even know you were holding. The kind that kept you loving the idea of someone, rather than the reality of what stood before you. But not all truth hurts. Some reveals. And some heals. Because just as some bonds will dissolve, quietly, painfully, beautifully, others will become visible in a way they never were before. You may realize someone has been standing with you the entire time, unnoticed, unsung, unshakable. Someone whose presence never demanded your attention, but whose energy never left. And for the first time, your spirit is soft enough, clear enough, healed enough to recognize them. This is what Venus does, not just showing you what's false, but illuminating what's been real all along. And this journey of uncovering, of learning to see what love actually is woven through scripture and spirit alike. The Song of Solomon 3 verse 4 says, I found the one my soul loves. But the line doesn't come from instant union, it comes from pursuit. From emptiness. From midnight wandering and longings unmet. The beloved isn't found in ease. They're found in the aftermath of searching, in the aching space between what once was and what longs to be. Just like you. Just like now. And let's be clear, this isn't just about romance. This is about every sacred bond in your life. Friendships. Family. Energetic contracts that stretch lifetimes. All of them are coming into sharper focus. You may feel called to speak truth where you used to hold silence. To distance where you used to cling. To forgive, not to excuse the past, but to free yourself from reliving it. What's being revealed now is who still resonates with your refined frequency, and who only belonged to your former version. And then there's the greatest unveiling of all, the one that happens when the illusion you've held about yourself finally dissolves. When you realize that the love you were waiting for was never lost. It was simply buried beneath layers of performance, self-betrayal, and longing for reflection. Now, as Venus moves forward, you meet yourself again. Not the curated version, not the one who loved to be chosen, but the original. The one who remembers she is already whole. Already worthy. Already home. So if your relationships begin to shift this week, if words are said, if truths emerge, if sudden endings or divine reconnections find you, trust it. Trust that you're not being punished. Trust that this clarity is not cruelty. It is grace. The timing is not random. The unraveling is not chaos. It is alignment. It is divinely timed. Let the veil fall. Let the truth rise. And let the love that's left standing be the kind that finally sees you, holds you, and honors the version of you that made it through the fire. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels hollow. And during this Venus retrograde, you may have felt that silence press in from all sides. Prayers went unanswered. Signs felt muted. Dreams dulled. Even your own emotions, normally sharp, vibrant, intuitive, felt distant, as if your soul had slipped underwater and was just floating, barely tethered to the surface of your life. You weren't just emotionally tired. You were spiritually numb. But that numbness wasn't failure. It wasn't regression. It was a sacred kind of disconnection, a divine pause designed not to punish, but to rewire. You weren't being ignored by the heavens. You were being realigned by them. If you've been spiritually numb, there's a reason. Venus was not just turning inward, she was taking you with her. Into the deepest chambers of your heart. Into the forgotten corners where the sacred had become routine, where wonder had turned into weariness. She didn't take away your joy, your passion, or your intuition. She silenced them, temporarily, so that you would feel the ache of their absence, and remember how precious they truly are. Be still, and know that I am God, says Psalm 46 verse 10. But the stillness the verse speaks of isn't the peaceful kind we crave. It's the stillness that comes after collapse. The quiet that follows the storm. The kind of spiritual silence that requires surrender, not because we have nothing to say, but because heaven is inviting us to stop talking long enough to truly listen. During this retrograde, you may have questioned yourself more than ever. You may have lost interest in what once lit you up. Even your connection to the divine may have felt severed, confusing, or painfully dry. But here's the mystery, you were not disconnected. You were being emptied, cleared out like a sacred vessel so that a new, more aligned frequency could pour in. It was never about rejection. It was about refinement. Because the version of you that's emerging, the version that Venus has been shaping in the fire, is not content with shallow passion or surface-level spiritual performance. That version doesn't want to be inspired. That version wants to burn with purpose. With clarity. With beauty that feels holy, not just pleasing. And now, as Venus moves direct, the switch flips. Slowly at first, then suddenly, you may begin to feel again. You may wake up with a song in your spirit, a knowing in your chest, a hunger that isn't about consumption but about communion. The desire is returning, not the frantic kind, not the desperate search for validation or inspiration, but the sacred kind. The kind that rises from within like a soft flame and says, I'm ready to live again. I'm ready to feel again. I'm ready to meet the divine in the ordinary. And perhaps most surprisingly, you'll realize that the silence didn't kill your connection to spirit, it deepened it. Because when the signs come back now, you won't chase them. You'll recognize them. When intuition speaks, you won't question it. You'll trust it. When joy returns, it won't be a high, it will be a home. So if your heart starts to stir today, if you feel the first flickers of spiritual warmth returning to places that have gone cold, lean in. You're not imagining it. You're reawakening. And this time, you're not just a seeker, you are becoming the sacred flame you've been reaching for. At some point, without meaning to, you started spending your energy on things that quietly emptied you. You gave your time to situations that no longer inspired you. You offered your love to people who no longer saw you. You traded your attention for approval, your creativity for comfort, your passion for predictability. Not because you were weak, but because something in you was still learning how to define value. And here's the truth, you've been buying what you no longer believe in. Subscribing to beliefs that kept you small. Investing in relationships where your worth was discounted. Staying loyal to patterns that once served a past version of you, but no longer reflect who you're becoming. The currency of your soul has been flowing into accounts that never had the power to repay you. But today, something shifts. Not just emotionally. Energetically. Spiritually. Economically. Because Venus, goddess of value, is no longer moving backward. She's anchoring herself again. And with that comes a rewriting of what you call valuable. You begin to see with new eyes. Not eyes clouded by fear, or fantasy, or conditioning, but eyes washed clean by the sacred fire of transformation. It is written in Revelation 3 verse 18, "Buy from me gold refined in the fire, and salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see." This is not symbolic poetry. It is a divine transaction. You are being asked to stop buying into what the world calls valuable, appearance over authenticity, noise over nourishment, performance over presence. And instead, you're being offered something eternal, refined gold. The kind of worth that doesn't lose value when you're alone. The kind of truth that doesn't disappear when you're no longer pleasing everyone. The kind of vision that can finally tell the difference between what glitters and what's real. Today, you start choosing differently. You stop paying with your peace. You stop negotiating with your intuition. You stop over-investing in the people, patterns, and projects that cannot hold your light. This is a spiritual rebalancing. A sacred audit. And every exchange going forward, of time, energy, love, attention, must now be filtered through a single, clarifying question. Does this make me spiritually richer, or spiritually bankrupt? That's what Venus has been trying to show you. That your value isn't in how much you can give without breaking. It's in how clearly you recognize what you deserve, and how boldly you choose to align with it. You're not here to prove your worth anymore. You're here to embody it. Not just in words, but in the invisible agreements you make with life each day, where you go, what you allow, who you trust, what you tolerate, and most importantly, what you no longer spend yourself on. So let the old marketplace collapse. Let the systems that taught you to trade your sacred for scraps fall apart. And walk into this new chapter with a different currency, one measured in peace, in purpose, in presence, in power. Because your value system has been rewritten. And now, it's time to live like it. There are days when truth arrives not as thunder, but as a whisper. Not in the rush of answers, but in the ache of recognition. This is one of those days. You may feel it in your chest, not as fear, not as anxiety, but as a quiet knowing that something unseen is starting to shift. That the air feels different, the timing uncanny, the emotion rising without warning. A dream may return from the night before, lingering longer than it should. A conversation, seemingly casual, may echo in your spirit like prophecy. Or a memory you thought was buried may surface with new clarity, no longer to haunt you, but to remind you of something you were always meant to remember. This is not just Venus. This is spirit, moving through the hidden places. Speaking in the language of beauty. Delivering divine messages through resonance, not reason. It is subtle, but unmistakable. You don't need to decode it. You only need to feel it. It's like the moment when Mary Magdalene stood at the tomb, weeping in the silence, blinded by grief and loss. She did not recognize the risen Christ, until he spoke one word, her name. "Mary," he said, John 20 verse 16, and suddenly her soul remembered what her eyes could not yet see. It wasn't logic that revealed the truth. It was love, spoken in a frequency only she could hear. And in that moment, the veil lifted. That is what's happening today. The Spirit is calling you by name, not your label, not your role, but the eternal signature that heaven wrote into you before your first breath. And when it comes, you won't need to ask for confirmation. You will just know. Because this is not a day of explanation. It's a day of recognition. And in that recognition, something ancient returns, not just a moment of awakening, but a full body, full spirit recollection of who you are beneath everything the world taught you to be. This is not healing in the way you've known it. This is resurrection. Because what's happening now is not just emotional. It's structural. Energetic. Divine. You are not simply patching old wounds or soothing broken parts. You are remembering your sacred design. You are putting yourself back together, not as you were, but as you were always meant to be. The voice that stopped speaking. The heart that stopped trusting. The desire that once felt too dangerous to name. They are coming back, not fragile, but reborn. It is the same image the prophet Ezekiel was given, a field of dry bones scattered across the valley. Lifeless. Forgotten. Disconnected. And then came the word. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, they came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Ezekiel 37 verse 10. That's what this moment is. Breath returning. Bones realigning. Desire reforming. Voice re-emerging. And that's why this version of self-love feels different. It's not performative. It's not borrowed from affirmations or rituals. It's not soft, but sacred. It's not self-centered, it's God-centered. It's love as remembrance. Love as return. Love as the moment your soul turns back toward its origin and finally says, I see you now. I remember who I am. You are not rebuilding. You are resurrecting. And this time, nothing within you gets left behind. Today, Venus goes direct, and so do you. Something ancient within you has turned forward again. Not just a new mindset, not just fresh clarity, but a full spiritual redirection. You're not going back to who you were before this retrograde. You can't. That version of you has been dissolved in the fire. This is not about recovery. This is about remembrance. You are returning to your heart, but not just the emotional one that reacts and aches and beats. You are returning to the eternal heart, the one that was formed in light before your body ever took breath. The one that Jeremiah 1 verse 5 spoke of when God said, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That knowing is awakening now. It's not a concept. It's a presence. And it's rising inside you like a name you had forgotten you carried. Let the old illusions burn away. Let the false roles, the half-loves, the borrowed dreams dissolve. Let what couldn't survive the stillness fall off you like old skin. What remains is the bride, whole, radiant, unshakable. Not the bride waiting to be chosen, but the one who remembers she has always been in divine covenant. Not because of what she offers, but because of who she is. And when you hear the whisper now, when the voice inside no longer asks but declares, don't second guess it. Don't shrink. Don't wait for permission. The door is open. The veil is thin. And the voice within you is not requesting anymore. It's declaring, now is the time. And you, beloved, are finally ready to walk through.